Hi, I'm Simon Hill, and you're watching Purebred Reds Adelaide United Fan TV.
Are you after the latest and greatest football kits, boots, goalkeeper gear, teamwear, accessories, or equipment? Look no further than South Australia's very own soccer specialty store, Soccer Locker. An Australian-owned and operated business, the store is located at Shop 5 of 181 to 183 Grange Road, Findon. Founded in 2012, Soccer Locker was introduced into the market to fulfill all the soccer-related needs of Australians, providing a huge range of quality clothing and equipment ranging from soccer balls, team kits, goalkeeper gear, accessories and much more. As well as stocking all current football merch from your favourite overseas teams, recently arrived stock also includes stunning retro kits from some of our favourite past eras as fans of the World Game. So get shopping now at our Findon store, open from Monday to Friday and open Saturdays from 9am to 3pm. Or visit us online and take advantage of free shipping from across Australia at soccerlocker.com.au.
So many big issues in the world of football at the moment, and Lord knows I can't ask you two about them, so thankfully we have ourselves a proper journalist, a proper expert. Please welcome Chief Football Writer for the Herald Sun, David Davutovic. Good to have you.
Thank you very much, George. Pleasure to be with you here today, but of course you're not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to football royalty, that is Harry Kewell. Now, Harry, it's always difficult to know where to start with you because there is so much to discuss, but I want to start on Melbourne. You played for two A-League clubs, Melbourne Victory, Melbourne City. You're back here doing clinics in Melbourne, and you're at the Football Federation Victoria luncheon. Why do you love the place so much?
First and foremost, thanks for having me here. It's a real pleasure always to be in a company of people that love the sport that I love, so thank you.
Back later, what's the story?
I think he's playing his last game, guys.
Yep.
A final decision hasn't been made, but obviously I play Adelaide United on Friday at Amy Park. He'll be heading to New York at the weekend. City are hopeful that he'll come back for a few games in December. They'll have negotiations with two clubs, New York and Melbourne, in the coming weeks. Happen to have the same owners as well, guys, so
that helps.
We're Sydney Wanderers, though, David. They had a great in the first leg of the final. The second leg, what can you tell us about that?
Well, they're checking in as we speak, guys. They fly to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia tonight. Obviously, they won the first leg 1-0.
G'day guys and welcome to the Purebred Reds Adelaide United Fan TV, coming to you with a preview of our huge blockbuster clash against Melbourne Victory. I'm your host Ellis Gelios and I'm joined by one of Australia's favourite football journalists to preview the game. He's currently freelancing after having been the chief writer at the Herald Sun for the best part of the last 2 decades. I speak of the wonderfully talented David Davutovic. David, welcome to the show.
Very kind introduction, Ellis. Good to be with you, mate.
Awesome to have you on, mate. It's been a very interesting time for our game over the past 12 months. I just want to get your read on, where it all sits with you.
It has been an interesting time, and obviously COVID has affected a lot of sports across the world. In Australia, I actually attended my first A-League game in almost a year the other day here in Melbourne, and it was just nice to be back at a live sporting event and nice to have a crowd there as well. So I think we're really blessed here in Australia when you look at there's games going on at the moment in the Premier League and no crowds and all that. So we are very lucky, but it's forced a bit of a reset in Australian football and perhaps a reset that needed to happen. I've been banging on about young Australian players getting more opportunities for a long time. And in some ways it's taken a global pandemic for it to happen. But look, to be honest, Adelaide United was very much ahead of the curve. And we saw last season a real policy shift towards playing younger players and particularly local players. And it seems to have gone down really well with Adelaide United fans. And I've enjoyed watching them. And certainly across the board now, there are a lot more younger Australian players getting opportunities. And I think there is a real appetite from fans to, for this to happen. And I think a lot of clubs have got the balance pretty much spot on now.
Couldn't agree more, Dave. We'll get straight into the preview. So the game is a 7:10 p.m. kickoff this Saturday evening at Cooper Stadium. No squads at the time of filming. As always, though, you can catch the action on Fox Sports or the KO Sports app. So let's jump straight into it. What stood out for you in Adelaide's humiliating display against the Glory on Wednesday evening? The Reds looked shambolic defensively, and the flat energy levels seemed rather uncharacteristic of Carl Veart's Adelaide so far.
Yeah, 8 goals is always good for the neutral, isn't it? Not so much for the coaches or the losing team. But what stood out to me, apart from the obvious, and it looked like Adelaide United were going to cop a battering at one stage, but the fact that they came back, the fact that they kept fighting, and particularly with so many young players on the field, and I think that is a massive positive to take out of the game moving forward. I'm not just saying it because I'm on the show. That was what really stood out to me late in that game. I mean, that could have easily been, 6 or 7-1. You look at the way Andy Keogh chased that ball down to set up the goal for Carlo Armiento, mate. They weren't, putting their foot on the ball and playing to hold the score. They were going for the kill. So absolute credit to Carl Veart and to Adelaide United. And then, when you look at the fact that Johnny Yull comes on as an example, as a 15-year-old late in the game, and I think the score at that stage was 4-1 and it went to 5-1. But then, a very young Adelaide team with a 15-year-old on there come back and score 2 late goals. I think that is a huge credit. I mean, and Mo Toure obviously scoring one of those. It's an absolute credit to Adelaide United, and I think there's a lot of positives to take forward. It is obvious that when you have a young team, you're going to get wild inconsistency. That's normal. And you look at someone like James Dalianov as a goalkeeper. I mean, if you assess that, and Eugene Galekovic would no doubt be reviewing it with Dalianov, but, it goes back to the point about the lack of match minutes for a lot of these younger players. So they haven't been exposed to this kind of football, this regular tempo, using Dalianov as an example. I mean, he played for the young Socceroos in those qualifiers probably 3 years ago now. It's all a bit of a mishmash now with this COVID pandemic. So it'll take him time. But you look at any young keeper that's come in around the world, or even let's use Australia as an example. Matt Ryan made mistakes early on, but they persisted with him. Eugene Galekovic is a great example. Back in, I think, 1999, when he made his debut for Morwell Falcons, Gippsland Falcons, whatever they were called back then, he made a lot of mistakes. He turned one. You can ask him about this. He punched one into his own net at one stage, but they persisted with him. And, I mean, not deliberately, obviously. He went to punch it the other way. But all of these guys, Joey Diddlitzer, back when I was watching the Melbourne Knights, used to make a lot of howlers. 2 years later, he's keeping for Ajax Amsterdam in the UEFA Champions League final. So it's normal. And as long as they persist with them and they accept that kids will make mistakes, they'll improve. So, and I think Adelaide will persist. I think there's really exciting times ahead. And I guess, strap yourselves in and enjoy the journey.
There you go, folks. Dave Davutovic shedding light on Eugene Galekovic's pre-A-League career, something we've never really been privy to. Adelaide Central
I've got a lot more about that too. Don't worry about that.
Oh, juicy stuff indeed. So Adelaide Central defenders, Elsie and Jakobsen, they looked in all sorts on Wednesday night. If you were Carl Veart, would you be ringing the changes for Saturday night, starting perhaps with George Timothy, the former Schalke prospect, as one to come in at centre-back?
Yeah, that's the obvious one, ringing the changes off the back of, such a game, such a result. Defence is a really interesting one because coaches tend to like to stick to, similar players in the defence, particularly the 2 stoppers and the goalkeeper, to a lesser extent, the fullbacks. But if you can keep that back 4, that back 5 really steady, back 6, if you're incorporating the defensive midfielder, you see a lot of those teams that go on and win the championships have that consistency. It's a really tough one. I guess they've almost got to look at it from a long-term viewpoint. And, who are the guys that we see being in central defence come the business end of the season? And, perhaps if they do see Timoteo as one of those, then perhaps it's, the opportunity to get him in. He came on. I mean, he's played for Schalke and over in Belgium. He's got a fantastic CV. So why not? But look, Elsie's been a solid citizen for a long time. Jakobsen is obviously got fantastic pedigree, the Danish defender. So yeah, that's a really tough one. But again, it's credit to Adelaide United because they've got some really fantastic options there, and Mick Moroney can play in the central position as well. So yeah, some great options for United there. But I'm not the coach, mate, so I'll leave it to them.
Yeah, fair enough, mate. So with Wednesday's performance in mind, what have you made of Adelaide United from an overall perspective since the legend Carl Veart took the reins?
Yeah, love it. Great to see so many young coaches. And when I say young, I mean, I don't know exactly how old Carl Veart is, but he's not young per se, but young as a coach and young as a coach in an A-League sense. And again, I mean, it's unfortunate in the sense that we've had so few opportunities, and there's only that one job over in Adelaide, and there's so many former greats who have done fantastic jobs over the years, and Damien Murray is one that comes to mind. But there's always been this debate: are the young players good enough? Are the coaches good enough? Well, I think Carl Veart's shown that there are plenty of coaches out there waiting to get involved. Great to see Joe Mullen back in the Adelaide United setup there with the W League too. He's had a fantastic coaching record for a long time, another South Australian great. But yeah, back to Veart, I think what's important about this is that there's a real synergy between him and the staff, led by, I guess, Nathan Cosmina, the CEO, and Bruce Jitte, the director of football, and they've clearly gone down a particular direction. They realise that there will be inconsistency with results, with playing the kids and all that sort of stuff. But Carl certainly hasn't been scared to give them opportunities. And because he's been working with a lot of these young players for a longer period, he really knows their traits, their weaknesses, if you want to call them that. And, he's prepared to persist with them. And yeah, I just love the way they're going about it. When you look at that bench, Ross Aloisi, Eugene Galekovic, club greats. I think that's what it's all about. That's the essence of what a sporting club and a football club should be. So, yeah, credit to them. And he had a little record there for a bit, or equal to record, Carl Veart, in terms of without a loss. So good on him. So yeah, I've spoken about him a fair bit in recent months because he was, I don't know if you recall, he played against Argentina and Diego Maradona back in 1993 in the second leg in Buenos Aires. He was a bloody good striker back in his day, for those people who don't remember. So great to see him getting his first A-League coaching opportunity.
No doubt about it. I just want to follow up on the coaching point with Australians who are young into their coaching careers. You've interviewed the likes of Harry Kewell. I know you've rubbed shoulders with basically everyone there is in Australia's, in the sense of modern day times with young prospective Australian coaches who were past players on the biggest stage that there is. Dave, is there a real sense that our best young coaches here in Australia can match it with anyone in those sort of third tier, second tier European football leagues?
Yeah, and look, I reckon top tier. I think when you say is there a sense, it depends on who you ask. Like, we face massive challenges from a perception viewpoint over in Europe. So Kevin Muscat's a great example. His team was sitting third last over in Belgium, Sint-Truiden. And they had a couple of games. The club decided, or a particular board member decided, that we're going to judge him on these two games, and if he doesn't get 6 points or 4 points, we'll get rid of him. And they were both relegation scrappers. I think they ended up drawing both of those games, but they said enough's enough, and they called it quits. If he had a German passport or a Spanish passport or a Belgian passport, he may have got another few weeks or another few months for that matter. But the fact that he's Australian from the get-go, when he got interviewed when he was doing, media, there were no questions around his coaching successes over at Melbourne Victory. All the stuff was, obviously do the Google search and the Kevin Muscat tackles come up and all that sort of stuff. All the questions were related to his playing career. So here in Australia, we're off Broadway from a football viewpoint. So there'll always be that challenge there. That's why when you look at what Ange Postecoglou's done over in Japan, it's massive for him and for Australian football. And I've got no doubt if Ange Postecoglou got an opportunity in a top tier somewhere, with the backing of the club, that's key. We discussed that a moment ago with Adelaide United. You can't go in there with, a particular philosophy, which we all know how Ange wants to play, and yet you've got, a club that's, more, wanting to go down that pragmatic path. I mean, their values and their philosophies need to be aligned. But you've got Tony Popovic at the moment over in the Greek second division. They've just kicked off last weekend, and that goes to show as well. Greek second division with an Australian owner. I mean, that's how far off Broadway we are. Tony Popovic has won an Asian Champions League back in 2014, and obviously there's been a lot made here about the fact that he's never won a grand final. But if he was in pretty much any other country in the world, he would have won 2 titles because he's finished top of the table, including his first season. So I don't know, we kind of, in a sense, have a tendency to it's almost a cultural cringe factor, and we touch on that in our for a bit of self-promotion, one of the Optus Sports podcasts about to be released, and I don't know, we always seem to view our own a little bit more harshly. But yeah, make no mistake, we have some really good coaches. Mate, we've seen some shockers over here, some international coaches in the A-League, and I think our Aussie coaches are really good, and they just need backing, they need opportunity. And again, I'll go back to Ange Postecoglou. What he did with Yokohama F. Marinos, what was it, last season, year and a half ago, was extraordinary. Winning in an absolute canter, the football they played on maybe the 8th or 9th biggest budget in Japanese football, that tells you everything you need to know.
On the other hand, it's undoubtedly a new era for Melbourne Victory this season, and they dismantled our Totem Magic on Tuesday evening 4-0 in preparation for Saturday night's blockbuster. A lot of Adelaide fans seem to believe we'll bounce back immediately given the magnitude of the game that we have to look forward to. But it surely won't be that easy, Dave.
Yeah, we've loved the Melbourne Victory Adelaide United clashes over the years, haven't we? So I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm not sure how much a 4-1 or 4-0 win over Altona Magic will count for this game, Ellis. But look, important for Victory to get a hit out nonetheless, because they haven't played a couple of weeks. And look, they're going through a real regeneration, I guess. We know Marco Kurtz came there last season. It feels like about 4 years ago now.
Yeah, it does.
And a bit's happened since then. But obviously didn't work out. But Grant Brebner's come in, and they've got a bunch of new players. There's a few guys in there who either have been at the club for a long time or have returned, and they know what Melbourne Victory is about. I guess Adama Traore and Marco Rojas. So look, I think they'll be okay in the longer term, but short term there's going to be some challenges for them. I thought they impressed in the Asian Champions League without obviously going too well with the results. But again, it's just been such a challenging period for the Australian clubs, and that Asian Champions League came at a really, really difficult time. So it's a big game for them. It's a big game for both teams, to be honest, this Adelaide United Melbourne Victory clash, and I'm really looking forward to it. No doubt there'll be some fireworks.
Yeah, absolutely. He might not be Australian-born, Grant Brebner, but let's discuss him as a Victory legend. What have you made of his recruitment? And I know you touched on it briefly just then, but his display as coach of the team in the Asian Champions League and the team in general, it was a very random kind of ordeal, the Champions League, the hub over there in Doha. Felt like we were just immediately exposed to this completely new breadth of players at Melbourne Victory after, what seemed like a very unappealing team to watch in large parts of last season. So what do you make of just, two-part question, Brebner's recruitment and what the Asian Champions League displays kind of giving us a teaser for how we should expect Victory to come out this season?
Yeah, I wouldn't call Brebner dinky die Aussie, but he is Aussie. I mean, he's been here for 14, 15 years now. So I know I was listening to the A-League W League podcast with Garvey and Robbie Cornthwaite, the South Australian great, and they were sort of deliberating as to whether Brebsy was Aussie, and if we include him as an Aussie, then 11 of the 12 coaches in the A-League are Australian, which again is fantastic. But I think he's recruited well. He's obviously recruited pretty heavily from the UK. Guys like McManaman, who scored that cracking goal against Brisbane Roar, and Butterfield, who obviously is a classy midfielder. Rudy Jested came off the bench. He scored the other night against Altona, so he could certainly come into the mix. The former Aston Villa, Middlesbrough striker, amongst other clubs. So look, there's some decent visa talent there. There's a lot of factors at play, stuff on and off the field in terms of how they gel and whatnot. And then obviously, that Marco Kurtz era was really interesting as well, because there almost was that philosophical shift. So I'm not sure exactly what direction Grant Brebner wants to take it in, but he's been involved with the youth team for a long time. So a bit like what I was saying with Carl Veart, he has a really intimate knowledge of these younger players. We've already seen some of them play, and we'll certainly see more coming into the team. Anderson, as an example, starting as stopper in those first few games. But some real intrigue from the Victory fans around guys like Ben Falami, one of the Australian youth internationals who's come back from overseas. That's been a real feature of this A-League season. In my view, Timoteu is a case in point, and then MacArthur's got quite a few of them with Shushnyard and Jovanovic and Popovic, who is yet to debut. So always a little bit of intrigue around them. And guys like Burke and Curter, who's been in the system for a long time, was part of the Joeys. I think you'll see them, players like that, getting more opportunities under Brebs. As for the Asian Champions League, it was all over the shop. All sorts of stories coming out about those hubs and, whether it should have gone ahead and whatnot. But it was always going to be challenging for the A-League squads. A lot's been made about the comparative budgets. Ours are obviously way off. Then that came in the off season, whereas, most of those Asian teams were in season. So we were really up against it. I think, the biggest benefit coming out of it, and I think the coaches all view it this way, Sydney FC, maybe to a lesser extent, they had a little bit more solidity and continuity, but certainly from Melbourne Victory and Perth Glory's point of view, was just getting important games and exposure for those young players. We saw the other night for Perth Glory, Josh Rawlins, a 16-year-old right back. He looks so composed, and there's no doubt those 4 or 5 appearances in the Asian Champions League would have done him the world of good. And we saw, 2 or 3 of them feature for Melbourne Victory, Laurie Latanzio, amongst others. So I think that was the biggest benefit of that most recent Champions League hub.
Yeah, and just whilst we're talking about youngsters, it'd be remiss of me not to ask you about the young South Australian who seems to have escaped everyone's notice, Jay Barnett there at Victory. What do you make of him?
Well, he's got some Barnett, the boy, and by all reports, we've got the same hairdresser. Though I've never seen him in there, but he's done really well, and I know they rate him highly, and he is another one that will get minutes. I think there'll be some really good opportunities for him. He played about half an hour against Brisbane Roar, coming on for Butterfield the other night. So, look, I think it'll be one of those where it might be an injury or suspension, or just that cluster of fixtures that'll provide him with that opportunity, and hopefully he can take it. It's a bit harder for those midfielders because you almost need just that run of games to get into a bit of a groove. And I think back to someone like Josh Hope, and he comes on for 10 or 15 minutes so often, and it's just so hard for a guy like that who just needs to get into the rhythm of the game to make an impact. And yet these guys tend to be judged really harshly. But Barnett, will definitely see him playing a fair few minutes this season.
Interesting indeed. So there's no doubting, as the self-labelled biggest club in the land, that the Victory had an unacceptably poor season in 1920. Is the mood in Melbourne one that reflects optimism for the club's overall direction at the present time? And just bearing in mind that so much matters in every facet for Melbourne Victory. We know that they have their Victory in business luncheon, and they're a big corporate identity in Melbourne as well. So this club needs to be firing on all cylinders. Yeah,
they do. I think there's a mix of optimism, intrigue, uncertainty. with so many new players and yeah, obviously the uncertainty that COVID has brought and continues to bring with fixture changes and whatnot, players quarantining. Their squad did come. I mean, someone like Rudy Jested obviously came in fairly late. So yeah, look, there are a lot of challenges, but yeah, a lot of intrigue and excitement for, as I mentioned earlier, with someone like Falami and you know, Jakey Brimmer coming in. We've obviously seen him over at Perth Glory for a couple of seasons now, but Victory tried to sign him, you know, 4 or 5 years ago before he went to the Liverpool Academy. But yeah, it's
looks
a
like
really
it might be his
interesting one.
season for sure.
Sorry?
Looks like it definitely might be his season this year for Brimmer.
Yeah, very, very good player. And I think, you know, he started a lot of games at Glory, but, you know, there was a lot of really good players in that team, whereas he comes here as a, you know, a pretty big signing, and he's almost playing in that more advanced number 10 role. So I think, yeah, he's definitely a key player in that team, and I think he feels that he's taken on that responsibility. So yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes for Victor. I don't think anyone can really answer that question, but they are a big club, and a credit to them. They've done so well on and off the field, and I actually attended one of those Victory in Business functions 5 or 6 weeks ago now, and they got as many people as they could in there. I mean, they'd usually get 11 or 1,200 in that room, so they are a behemoth in a sporting sense here in Melbourne and Victoria, not just in an A-League sense.
Definitely. Cooper Stadium, it hasn't been kind to the visiting Victory for a long while now. Will that come into the equation?
Nor should it be.
Thank you. Will that come into the equation at all, though, this weekend, David?
Yeah, I think so. What's the crowd capacity at the moment at Cooper's?
I think it's capped at 12,000.
Yeah, so fantastic. I mean, if you can get even 8,000 or 9,000 in there, the joint, you'd imagine, will be humming. And yeah, I mean, the fans will remember Grant Brebner from all those epic duels back in the day.
Definitely.
So yeah, you know, he played in that infamous 2007 grand final. I'm sure would have clashed with Ross Aloisi. So I'm sure there'll be a bit of chirpiness on the sidelines as well. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to this game, and yeah, like just so much intrigue again with the young players and the new coaches and you know, emerging heroes. So yeah, can't wait for this one.
Yeah, plenty to look forward to. So I have to ask for your prediction.
I'm going to sit on the fence. I'll go for an entertaining 2-2 draw.
It's just interesting. All the journos I've had on recently have all been tipping draws. It's no one wants to put themselves on the line. That's all right though, Dave. We'll get into finding out a bit about yourself, the very distinguished career you've had in Australia's football media. So there is no doubt that you're one of the veterans of journalists that cover the game in this country. Tell us about your introduction to football. Presumably you didn't grow up thinking it would become your career in some way, or did you, for that matter?
Yeah, when I was young, for whatever reason, I decided, apparently, my late grandma told me this, that I wanted to be a journalist. I always used to buy the Herald Sun newspaper and read it from back to front.
Wow.
Developed, I mean, loved all sports, but eventually, yeah, zeroed in on football, played for what is now Dandenong City, back then at Chelsea Haydock Soccer Club. So, yeah, I was never any good. So, yeah, probably realised that pretty soon and focused on, yeah, writing and journalism and got in that way. But, yeah, some of my earliest memories, obviously, going to NSL games to watch Melbourne Knights down at Summers Street. Never forget the 95 grand final win over Adelaide City at Hindmarsh Stadium.
Big game.
It was, you know, yeah, and Melbourne Knights obviously broke their drought. Then there was also the 1993 FIFA Under-20 World Cup, which was massive. I remember that really well. And yeah, that just continued over the journey. And like any football fan, you follow the Socceroos in terms of World Cups and attempting to qualify for World Cups. And there was that big moment in 2006 when we qualified and those kinds of things. So, yeah, I was lucky enough to live overseas for a few years and work for Fox Sports as a European correspondent. So I've been very lucky, very blessed. I mean, there's a lot worse jobs in the world.
Ditto that. You covered the game far and wide as the Herald Sun and News Corp's chief football writer. Also, as you just mentioned, contributed to Fox Sports' coverage of the A-League incrementally. Take us back and tell us how you first got here and about some of the greatest memories you hold from this chapter in your life and some of the adventures the gig took you on.
Yeah, so I did work experience at Soccer International magazine and just kept writing, did local reports here in Melbourne for Australian and British Soccer Weekly and, various publications. Was writing match reports at the Sydney Olympics for the SOCOG website. Most of that was all unpaid. Still owed a bit of money from back in those days. I'm not sure it'd be too much money, to be honest. But then I was lucky enough to get 2002 World Cup was a real turning point. I went there for Soccer International and the Croatian Herald, and then off the back of that experience, got offered a cadetship with the Geelong Advertiser, where I was for a couple of years, and then it kind of went from there. So it was a general cadetship, very quickly focused on sport. There was a lot of AFL, a little bit of football. Then I moved over to the Sunday Times in Perth and was there for a couple of years. And again, it was primarily AFL with a bit of football, but that coincided with the Socceroos qualifying for the 2006 World Cup. And then I was offered a job as a full-time football writer at the Daily Telegraph in Sydney. And since then, very much been focused on the round ball code.
Yeah, I just want to ask, whilst you were covering the game at the 2002 World Cup, getting up close and personal with some of those Croatian stars, was that sort of the first moment you experienced whereby, because the game in Australia wasn't really at the point that it is now back then, it really occurred to you that, you're doing this, like, here you are, little Melbourne guy, getting to experience this. I mean, this was the kind of dawn that we weren't really privy to at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I was completely starstruck hanging out with these, Croatian players and journos. And the access was like ridiculous. You could basically stroll into the hotel and, the players are there in the foyer. Most of them are smoking cigarettes and just lounging about. And Joe Simonic, the Australian-Croatian star, he was phenomenal to me. He took me under his wing. A mutual friend of ours, Steve Vukasovic, connected us. And he was just fantastic. And he really took me in. I sat down. I had probably hours and hours of interviews with Joe, who'd only committed to Croatia about a year earlier. It was obviously a controversial one, but fantastic to me. And got to interview the Croatian coach from the 98 World Cup, Ciro Blažević. Of course, they got third place, and he was part of the journo crew. So was traveling around with us. So it was amazing. And it also made me realize the event itself. I was there from start to finish. I was lucky enough to get accreditation to the final. I don't know how, but it just made me realize the enormity of this event and how powerful football can be in Australia. And I think a lot of people, I've spoken to many people over the journey who've had those moments, and they tend to be overseas somewhere or for the most part at FIFA World Cup. So I was really blessed, really lucky. And from then on, there was no turning back.
Wonderful. Very, very inspiring. So you're Melbourne-based and grew up supporting Melbourne Knights, as we've touched on. Did you ever foresee, say, 2 decades ago, that Victoria would one day have 3 National League representatives and that the appetite for the game, particularly in Melbourne, would reach absolute fever pitch, particularly with some of the incredible Socceroos attendances we've seen there over the past few years, as well as the massive games that Melbourne Victory have obviously hosted? What do you make of all that?
Yeah, well, I think back to the NSL days, and there were more than 3 clubs at various stages. I mean, Knights and South Melbourne were all the regulars, but you had. I went to watch games at Heidelberg, at Morwell, which is obviously in the country area, Brunswick, Juventus or Brunswick Zebras. Georgie's a little bit before my time, but it was Carlton obviously came in at one stage. Collingwood Warriors were in. Fleetingly, I was at their first game at Victoria Park, 16,000. I think the next game was about 1,500. So
wow.
We've seen it all here in Victoria. But look, it's the whole A-League was there was some controversy around it about, how it started and replacing the National Soccer League. So, look, hopefully we can, learn from our past and move forward. But, the game has definitely progressed in the last, 5, 10, 15 years, however you want to look at it. But, there's certainly a lot of lessons still to be learned from that NSL era. But you mentioned those Socceroos matches and attendances. There've been some massive ones over the years. And hopefully, who knows when we'll be able to get full stadiums back. And there's also some question marks around Socceroos World Cup qualifying. But it's a lot of progress has been made despite the controversy. But there's a lot of work to be done still moving forward. So hopefully we can all progress, we can all unite and take the game forward, because the potential is enormous, and I still believe that we are barely scratching the surface here.
Yeah, and many in the Australian football media echo those sentiments. Dave, you're now freelancing, but still largely involved in covering football in the Australian media. One of the numerous projects you've got on your hands right now is obviously Optus Sports' very captivating Football Belongs series. You've chronicled some riveting history, including one episode that I found particularly poignant, in which the program detailed why football is not the main sport played in any of the British colonies, including obviously Australia. Talk to us about your involvement in the series, which fans can catch on Optus Sports or wherever you get your podcast from.
So, it's the Football Belongs banner started last year when we filmed a series of short stories. Myself and Ben Coonan produced them, and there were a bunch of crew involved from the Optus team. And very much with thanks to Richard Bayliss, the director of sport there, who really backed us in and supported us and gave us some fantastic creative assistance and feedback. So this podcast series has been is a separate project, but similarly under the Football Belongs banner, and very much is the brainchild of John Diddlitzer, the former PFA chief. And he's written 10 chapters, and it's titled Football Belongs 9 Matches That Explain Australia. So he's cleverly used 9 football matches, and some that are really obscure, and in some cases matches that didn't happen, to explain some different themes that are relevant to Australia. Cultural cringe, I mentioned earlier, First Nations people, which again is becoming really topical ahead of Australia Day, and many other themes. So the reference earlier was made by Dr. Andy Harper, who's just done a PhD on the de-legitimization of football, and makes some fantastic research there, which highlights the fact that there is a bit of a theory that football in Australia started in line with that European migration from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but his research proves that football in Australia started a long time ago, well over 100 years ago, and there has been a lot of research done, the likes of Roy Hay and some fantastic football historians. So not to discredit the work they've done, but we obviously do touch on it in the podcast, and I don't want to spoil it too much. It's definitely worth a listen. It's provocative at times, it's insightful, and if you want to learn about Australian football history, highly recommend it. And the latest one that's just dropped is Cultural Cringe, which relates to the Socceroos AC Milan match of 1993 at Princes Park, where the whistle blew after 36 minutes, and it kind of remains a mystery still as to why. But we delve very deeply into that one with Paul Trimboli, who was part of the Socceroos team, playing as the Lone Ranger against the famous AC Milan defence of Franco Baresi, etc., and Francis Leach, big football fan, former radio presenter Triple J. So, a few more to come, but they've been really exciting and highly recommended.
Yeah, it almost feels like we don't deserve this type of content at the moment, David. But it's very much overdue. I think you're now a host at Ticker Sport and writing for the A-League's official website. Just tell us how that's all going as well.
Yeah, going well. Ticker Sport's been a great project, an OTT platform that's only been around for just over a year. So hosting a sports show, we talk about sport through a business lens. So yeah, it's been an exciting project to be a part of. That'll kickstart again in February. And yeah, doing some content for the A-League website, which has been good fun too. So yeah, Tom Smithies, Simon Hill as well, doing some stuff there, and Sam Lewis, with some W League content. So yeah, exciting times ahead.
Really great to hear, David. Dave Davutovic, one of the most serviceable Australian football writers, has penned some fantastic opinionated and investigative pieces, and still very much does. Been an absolute privilege to interview you, mate. We'll look out for all your work across all those mediums, and you take care of yourself and stay safe, and enjoy the football.
Thanks, Alice. Great work.